What if I told you that you don't have to give up bread, rice or potatoes after 60 to protect your blood sugar, that there are simple, science-backed ways to enjoy the foods you love with much smaller spikes? I know how that advice lands. You're told to cut carbs, and suddenly meals you once enjoyed feel off limits, and that becomes lonely, frustrating, and frankly unfair. I'm Dr. Emily Carter. I've worked in geriatric and metabolic health for more than 20 years, and I've helped hundreds of people, over 60, find practical ways to eat with confidence again. Before we dive in, a quick and important note. This video is educational and not individualized medical advice. Talk with your healthcare provider before making significant changes, especially if you're on medications that affect blood sugar, have kidney disease, reflux, or other medical concerns. Today, I'll walk you through 8 science-backed strategies that, when used thoughtfully, can let you enjoy carbs with much smaller post-meal blood sugar rises. These are not magic pills. They're practical adjustments to how you prepare foods, how you order your plate when you eat, and a few safe additions that change how your body handles starch. Pick 1 or 2 to start. They stack together. The benefits add up. If you want more practical, evidence-based tips for aging well, please like this video and share it with someone who worries about carbs. Strategy 1. Resistant starch. Method: cook, cool, reheat. Let's start with a kitchen trick that quietly changes the structure of starch. When starchy foods like rice, potatoes, and pasta are cooked and then cooled, some of the starch molecules reorganize into a form called resistant starch. Resistant starch resists digestion in the small intestine and instead travels to the colon, where it's fermented by friendly bacteria into short-chain fatty acids such as butyrate. That process slows how quickly glucose appears in the bloodstream after a meal and can blunt the height of the post-meal spike. In clinical studies and controlled experiments, adding resistant starch into the diet has been associated with smaller postprandial rises and better metabolic markers. The exact numbers vary, but you can expect meaningful reductions when combined with other strategies. What to do today? Cook your rice, potatoes, or pasta the day before. Cool them in the refrigerator for 12-24 hours, then reheat and eat. Try this with a pot of plain rice or a batch of baked potatoes portioned into containers. Cooling doesn't mean the food spoils the benefit. Reheating preserves much of the resistant starch benefit, so you still get a warm meal. If you like pasta salad, that's another easy win. Make it ahead, chill it, and enjoy. Quick precaution: always cool and store foods safely to reduce bacterial risk, and reheat thoroughly. If you use insulin or medications that cause lows, keep monitoring your glucose, as individual responses can vary. Strategy 2. Food order: vegetables and protein first, carbs last. The order in which you eat matters more than most people expect. When you start a meal with non-starchy vegetables and protein, a salad, steamed veg, a piece of fish or chicken, you slow stomach emptying and blunt the initial surge of glucose into the bloodstream. Protein and fiber also stimulate different gut hormones that tell the pancreas and the liver to modulate glucose handling more gently. In practice, trials looking at food sequence show smaller and steadier glucose curves when low-starch foods and protein precede the carbohydrate portion. What to do today? Begin your plate with a salad or a bowl of steamed vegetables, then have your protein and enjoy the starchy part last. At restaurants, order an appetizer salad or ask for the bread to be served with the main course so you can start with greens. Even waiting 5 to 10 minutes after the protein before taking a bite of bread or rice can make a measurable difference. Quick precaution: for people with chewing or swallowing difficulties, adapt this approach by choosing softer, non-starchy options first or working with your caregiver or speech therapist to ensure safety. Strategy 3. Post-meal movement: gentle activity in the 15-30 minute window. Muscle is a glucose sink. When muscles contract, they take up glucose from the bloodstream through pathways that don't always require insulin. That's why light activity after a meal, a gentle walk, standing and doing chores, marching in place, helps your body clear the glucose that enters your blood after you eat. Research shows that moving soon after meals, particularly within that 10-30-minute window, reduces post-meal glucose peaks. The amount of reduction varies by activity and individual, but the effect is clear and immediate. What to do today? Aim for a 10 to 20-minute gentle walk starting about 10-15 minutes after a meal. If outdoor walking isn't possible, stand and move at home. Do a few laps through your living space, put on music and march in place, or do purposeful standing chores like folding laundry. For those with limited mobility, seated leg lifts, ankle pumps, or a short sequence of sit-to-stands can engage muscle and offer benefit. Quick precaution: if you have balance issues, dizziness, severe arthritis or cardiovascular concerns, choose safe, supported movements and check with your clinician first. Avoid sudden intense exertion after a meal if you're not used to it. Strategy: 4. Circadian timing. Favor carbs earlier in the day. Our bodies change across the day. Insulin sensitivity, how well your tissues respond to insulin, tends to be stronger in the morning and weaker at night. Melatonin, the hormone that prepares us for sleep, also affects insulin secretion, so late-night carbohydrate loads tend to cause higher glucose excursions. In older adults, these diurnal patterns can shift subtly, making timing an accessible lever to pull. What to do today? Aim to include most of your day's carbohydrate at breakfast and lunch, rather than a large carbohydrate-heavy dinner. If you enjoy bread or rice, plan them for earlier meals and choose lighter evening options that emphasize vegetables and protein. Try to finish your last meal 2 to 3 hours before bedtime when possible, which can help blunt nighttime glucose elevations. Quick precaution: be mindful if you take glucose-lowering medications that can cause hypoglycemia. Changing meal timing without adjusting medications can increase risk. Talk to your provider before making major timing changes. Strategy: 5. Carbohydrate quality. Choose whole structures over refined ones. Not all carbs are created equal. Imagine 2 piles of wood. One is fine sawdust that burns fast and hot. The other is dense logs that burn slowly. Refined carbohydrates, white bread, many packaged snacks, and highly processed grains behave like sawdust. They break down quickly and send rapid sugar into the bloodstream. Whole or minimally processed carbs, whole grains, beans, intact brown rice, and certain starchy vegetables have more fiber and structure. That structure slows digestion and smooths the rise in blood glucose. Replacing highly processed items with whole forms doesn't mean deprivation. It means choosing versions that preserve fiber and cellular structure. What to do today? Swap one refined option for a whole option you enjoy. Choose brown rice or mixed grains occasionally instead of only white rice. Try a slice of sprouted or sourdough bread rather than highly processed white bread. Add beans or lentils to soups and salads to pair with small portions of starch. Small substitutions like these often reduce the sharpness of post-meal glucose rise and improve fullness. Quick precaution: some whole grains and legumes need more cooking or gradual introduction to avoid bloating. Increase fiber slowly and drink water. If you have specific digestive conditions, check with your clinician or dietitian. You might be wondering, do these steps really add up? The answer is yes, but not because one step is a miracle. Studies show that modest reductions in post-meal spikes, often in the range of about 20–40% in controlled settings when several practical strategies are combined, are achievable. The power comes from stacking. The resistant starch trick might shave a portion off the spike, sequencing your plate adds more, and a short walk after the meal reduces it further. Together, they change the shape of the glucose curve in a way that protects cells, and reduces the stress that frequent high spikes impose over time. A quick clinical note from my practice: patients often ask what to try first. Start with the easiest, most sustainable step. For many, that's adjusting food order or adding a short walk after meals. For someone comfortable in the kitchen, the cook-cool-reheat method is an easy batch cooking change that lasts all week. Keep a simple log for a week. Note what you ate, what strategy you used, and how you felt. That feedback helps you and your clinician see what's working. Let me tell you about Helen, a 70-year-old retired librarian I worked with who felt trapped between loving food and worrying about her blood sugar. Helen had been told to avoid bread and potatoes, but those were part of her coffee hour ritual and Sunday lunches. She was tired of feeling guilty at the table. Together we chose 3 modest changes she was willing to try. First, she agreed to cook a double batch of rice on Sunday, cool it in the fridge, and reheat single portions through the week. Second, she started plating her meals with salad and a small piece of fish before adding rice. Third, she began taking a short, slow walk around her neighborhood about 10 minutes after lunch. At first, Helen was skeptical. She expected small changes to feel insignificant. She also worried that walking after meals would be inconvenient. But the routine fit her life. The rice was ready. The salad was a quick bowl with olive oil and vinegar. The walk became a gentle break with neighbors she bumped into. She kept a simple notebook. Over 2 weeks, she began to notice less post-lunch sluggishness and fewer mid-afternoon energy crashes. When we checked her week of glucometer readings, the post-meal peaks were lower on the days she combined 2 or 3 strategies, compared with no changes. Helen didn't see overnight miracles. Nothing dramatic happened in 2 days. But the slow, steady shift lowered her anxiety about meals and made food feel like company again instead of a problem. That story captures what I see again and again. Small, manageable changes that respect your routines and preferences are more sustainable and more meaningful than dramatic restriction. They restore enjoyment while improving metabolic responses. Before we take the next step, a reminder, what I'm sharing is educational. If you have existing conditions, for example reflux, gastroparesis, kidney disease, or you're taking medications that affect blood sugar, please check with your clinician before experimenting with supplements or big meal timing changes. Now, in the next section, we'll cover a few additional strategies that complement the ones we've discussed. Vinegar and acetic acid tactics that modestly slow digestion using soluble fiber as a preload to form a gel in the stomach, and nutritional supports that help insulin signaling. We'll also talk about practical safety tips for older adults and how to build a 2-week plan you can actually keep. But before we move on, let's pause for a moment and pull these first 5 strategies together in a way that feels useful, not overwhelming. Imagine one weekday. You make a simple breakfast with a slice of sprouted toast, scrambled eggs, and a small bowl of berries. At lunch, you have a chilled rice bowl prepared days earlier, but you start with a plate of greens dressed in a vinaigrette, enjoy a piece of grilled salmon, wait a couple of minutes, then have your rice. About 15 minutes later, you take a gentle walk around the block. Dinner is lighter, mostly vegetables and a modest portion of protein, finishing a few hours before bed. Across the day, you've used structure, cook, cool, reheat, sequence, veggies and protein first, movement, post-meal walk, timing, most carbs earlier, and quality, whole grains and beans instead of processed snacks. Each step nudges your glucose curve down and flattens it out, often in measurable ways. Helen's first 2 weeks looked a lot like that. She reported that the routine felt doable and that it slowly erased the fear she had around mealtimes. She started to invite friends over again because she no longer felt the need to avoid what others ate. That social benefit is often overlooked, but it's central to quality of life after 60. We're about to get into vinegar and soluble fiber, plus the nutritional supports I mentioned. These are small additions that, when used safely, can amplify the effects you already have from ordering your plate or taking a post-meal walk. There are a couple of technical points worth keeping in mind as we proceed. Acetic acid can slow gastric emptying and blunt starch digestion modestly, but it must be diluted to protect teeth and the esophagus. Soluble fiber forms a gel that delays absorption but should be increased slowly to avoid bloating, and supplements that support insulin signaling, magnesium and polyphenol-rich foods like berries and tea can be helpful in dietary amounts and sometimes as supplements after clinician review. When we come back to those strategies, I'll give clear, simple actions you can try this week and one-line precautions for each. We'll also expand Helen's story to show how she layered a vinegar-based vinaigrette and a small bowl of oat-based fiber before one meal, and how that affected her sense of fullness and glucose pattern. And I'll share an easy 2-week plan you can copy, starting with the 1 or 2 steps that feel most realistic for your life. Before we pause, a practical tip I often hand out in clinic: keep a tray in the fridge labeled "Cool and Reheat." When you cook, portion one meal into that tray and place it in the fridge to cool quickly and safely. It removes the daily decision-making friction and makes the resistant starch trick automatic. Small design changes like that are why people stick with new habits. Remember, none of these steps require giving up the foods you love. They reframe how you prepare, sequence, and pair them. If you're ready, when we continue, I'll walk you through vinegar strategies, soluble fiber preloads, and safe nutritional supports, followed by a clear 2-week starter plan and some troubleshooting tips for common barriers like dining out or limited mobility. We'll also fold back to Helen to see what changed for her after a full month of stacking strategies. Strategy 6. Vinegar amplification, a small acid that changes the curve. A little-known kitchen-friendly trick is to use acetic acid, the active component of vinegar, to slow how quickly starches are broken down and leave the stomach. In plain English, vinegar modestly delays digestion, which means glucose is released into the bloodstream more slowly after a meal. Several controlled trials and metabolic studies have found that a vinegar-based preload or a vinegar-containing dressing can reduce the height of the immediate post-meal glucose rise. The effect is modest on its own, but meaningful when added to other steps like sequencing and movement. What to do this week? Make a simple vinaigrette with 1 part vinegar to 3 parts oil and drizzle it over your salad before the starchy part of the meal. If you prefer a quick drink, dilute a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in a large glass of water and sip it 10-15 minutes before eating. Using vinegar in a dressing means you get the acetic acid with flavor and without having to sip a separate drink. For those who take this route, consistency matters. Try it with a few meals this week and note how you feel afterwards. Quick precaution: vinegar must be diluted. Undiluted vinegar or frequent sipping can irritate the esophagus, worsen reflux, and damage tooth enamel. If you have reflux, a history of esophagitis, or gastroparesis, check with your clinician before trying vinegar strategies. Also, vinegar may interact with some medications and can lower potassium in certain situations. Discuss it with your provider if you take diuretics or potassium-altering drugs. Mini hook. You'd be surprised how much a little splash of vinaigrette can change the shape of your glucose curve, and it's one of the easiest habits to try. Strategy 7. Soluble fiber. Preload. Make a little gel your ally. Soluble fiber behaves like a sponge. When mixed with liquid, it forms a viscous gel in your stomach that slows the movement of food and the absorption of sugars. That slower absorption smooths the post-meal glucose rise and increases the sense of fullness. In studies where people ate a small fiber-rich preload before a carbohydrate meal, for example, a small bowl of vegetable soup, a soaked tablespoon of chia, or a porridge starter, Postprandial glucose peaks were blunted compared to eating the carbohydrate alone. The effect is particularly useful when you're about to eat a starchy meal that you enjoy but want to moderate. What to do today? Try a small, fiber-rich starter before a main meal. That could be a warm bowl of vegetable soup, a few tablespoons of oats soaked in milk or yogurt for 10-15 minutes, or a tablespoon of chia seeds soaked in water or juice until they swell. Another practical option is a small cup of cooked lentils or a spoonful of plain, ground oats mixed into yogurt. Start with a modest amount. For many people that looks like 1 to 2 tablespoons of a soluble sauce, and increase slowly over several days. Quick precaution: increase soluble fiber gradually and drink extra water. For some people, a sudden jump in soluble fiber causes bloating, cramping, or gas. If you have intestinal strictures, recent abdominal surgery, or certain motility disorders, discuss fiber changes with your clinician before trying them. If you're on medications that rely on rapid absorption, take pills at a different time from concentrated fiber snacks to avoid interference. Mini hook. Think of soluble fiber as a soft break, gentle, simple, and especially helpful when combined with the cook-cool reheat or food sequencing tricks. Strategy 8. Insulin sensitivity. Support magnesium and polyphenols from real foods. Beyond how you prepare and time meals, the internal cellular work of insulin can be supported through food patterns that reduce inflammation and provide micronutrients involved in insulin signaling. Magnesium plays a role in insulin receptor activity and glucose transport. Polyphenol-rich foods, the antioxidants in berries, tea, cocoa, and colorful herbs, appear to improve metabolic signaling and reduce oxidative stress. Clinical nutrition studies suggest that diets higher in these components are associated with better glucose control over time, particularly when paired with overall healthy habits. Again, none of this is a cure. It's supportive nutrition that helps the body respond better to the meals you choose. What to do in the next 2 weeks? Add more magnesium-rich, whole food choices and polyphenol sources to your plate. Include leafy greens, nuts like almonds or cashews, seeds, beans, and whole grains that you tolerate. Make berries, green tea, or a small portion of dark chocolate, 70% cocoa or more, a frequent treat rather than relying on packaged sweets. If you're considering a magnesium supplement, talk with your clinician first, particularly if you have kidney disease or take medications where magnesium could interact. Many people begin by focusing on food-first changes and then discuss targeted supplements with their provider. Quick precaution: supplements are not one-size-fits-all. Magnesium supplementation in people with impaired kidney function or in those on certain prescription medications can be risky. Bring lab values and a medication list to your clinician when you discuss supplementation. Mini hook. Small additions, like a handful of nuts or a cup of tea after a meal, are easy to do and create a nutritional background that supports the other steps. How Helen layered the last 3 strategies. A practical vignette. When Helen moved from trying 1 or 2 steps to stacking several, she didn't overhaul her life overnight. After the first 2 weeks of resistant starch rice, food sequencing and walks, she and I agreed to add a couple of manageable tweaks. For lunches, she began dressing her salad with a vinaigrette that contained apple cider vinegar, keeping the dressing on the side so she could control the amount. A few nights a week, she started her main meal with a small bowl of pureed vegetable soup, a comforting ritual that buffered the carbs that followed, and she made a point of adding a handful of spinach or kale to her morning smoothie and a cup of green tea in the afternoon. After another 2 weeks of these small additions, her subjective reports were encouraging. Fewer post-meal energy slumps, less preoccupation with what other people at the table were eating, and a growing confidence about inviting friends over. Objectively, her home glucometer logs, which she kept in a bound notebook, showed that the highest post-meal numbers tended to be lower on days when she combined 2 or 3 of these strategies, compared with days she went back to old habits. The change wasn't dramatic in a single day, but the trend over a month was a steady, measurable improvement. Most importantly to Helen, meals became social again and less stressful. 2-week starter plan. A gentle, practical way to begin. If the idea of 8 strategies feels like a lot, try this short, structured plan that keeps the changes focused and achievable. The goal is not perfection, it's to build habits you can maintain. Week 1. Pick 2 habits and make them automatic. Choose 1 kitchen or food prep habit and 1 behavioral habit. For example, start with the cook-cool-reheat method for your rice or potatoes. Batch cook on Sunday, cool in the fridge, reheat portions, and practice food sequencing at 2 main meals each day. Salad or steamed veg first, protein next, carbs last. Keep a small notebook or a note on your phone that says cold rice plus salad first, and check off each meal. If walking after meals is realistic for you, swap that behavioral habit in for sequencing. Pick what feels easiest. Week 2. Add 1 augmentation. If week 1 went well, introduce one of the smaller amplifiers. Vinegar in your salad dressing, a small soluble fiber starter before 1 meal, or a handful of nuts and a cup of green tea daily. Keep all changes modest. Continue batch cooking to reduce daily friction and keep your notes for a simple before and after sense of what's changing. How to track progress without getting obsessed. Keep the logs simple: meal, which strategy you used, and 1-word note about how you felt afterward, e.g. steady, sluggish, energetic. If you monitor glucose at home, chart a single post-meal reading a couple of hours after the meal for a week and compare the averages on strategy days versus non-strategy days. Bring that information to your clinician to discuss medication adjustments if needed. Quick troubleshooting, common barriers and realistic workarounds, dining out and social meals. You shouldn't have to skip social food to protect your blood sugar. In restaurants, the easiest steps are sequencing and portioning. Ask for a side salad before the entree, order protein-based starters, or split a carb-heavy side with a friend. Choose vinaigrette-dressed greens, and if bread arrives automatically, place it on a separate plate and have a bite after your protein. If a meal is a special occasion, plan a light snack beforehand, a small bowl of vegetable soup or a yogurt with ground oats, to avoid a single large spike. Limited mobility or balance concerns. Not everyone can walk 15 minutes after a meal, and that's okay. Substitute seated leg lifts, ankle pumps, or a set of sit-to-stands from a sturdy chair. Household tasks like standing to load or unload a dishwasher, folding clothing, or walking a short hallway with assistance are effective. Work with a physical therapist if balance or joint pain is a barrier. They can tailor safe routines. Dentition and chewing issues. If chewing is difficult, maximize the strategies that don't rely on texture. Use vinegar dressings, soluble fiber soups, and sequencing with pureed or soft proteins first. Soft forms of whole food carbs, e.g., well-cooked beans, mashed sweet potato, chilled and reheated, can retain much of the benefit of resistant starch if prepared properly. Reflux, GERD, and vinegar concerns. If you have reflux, approach vinegar cautiously. Use milder vinegars, a small amount in a dressing, and avoid undiluted vinegar sips. Speak to your clinician about reflux management before trying routine vinegar preloads. Medication considerations, an important safety point. If you take medications that lower blood sugar, especially insulin or sulfonylureas, changing meal timing, size, or composition can affect your glucose control. Do not alter medication doses on your own. Bring a simple meal log to your clinician and discuss adjustments. Many people simply need a small dose timing change or monitoring plan when they try these strategies. Putting the pieces together. Why stacking matters. Each step we've discussed nudges how quickly glucose enters your bloodstream or how efficiently your cells take it up. On its own, resistant starch reduces digestion rate. Sequencing slows gastric emptying and primes satiety hormones. A short walk engages muscle. Vinegar blunts early digestion. Soluble fiber creates a gel barrier, and nutrient-rich foods support the cellular machinery of insulin. None of these is a cure, and none replaces clinical care. But when combined, their effects compound. A 10–20% modest decrease from one tactic plus another, 10–20% from a different tactic, creates a much flatter, less stressful curve over the course of a day. In clinical practice, we've seen combinations produce measurable differences in post-meal readings and, importantly, in how people feel around food. A practical example that balances life and safety. Consider a person who enjoys a midday plate of rice and fish. A sensible approach that preserves flavor and dignity could look like this. Batch cook rice and cool it, make a small vinaigrette and dress a bowl of greens as a starter. Serve the fish, wait 2 to 5 minutes, then take your cooled and reheated rice. Finish with a short 10–15-minute walk after the meal. Add a mid-afternoon cup of green tea and a handful of nuts instead of a refined snack. Over several weeks, this combination often reduces the height and frequency of sharp post-meal spikes and restores confidence about shared meals. Measuring success beyond numbers, energy, stress, and social life. One of the outcomes I watch for with patients isn't only lower numbers. It's reduced anxiety around eating, improved energy patterns across the day, and greater willingness to share meals with others. Helen's story is a reminder. When fear of spikes recedes, people reconnect with friends and family and enjoy food for its cultural and emotional meaning again. Those quality-of-life benefits are as important as any meter reading. Final practical checklist to translate ideas into action. Begin with 2 small steps you can repeat daily. Batch cook, sequence your plate, or take a short walk after meals. Pick what fits your life. Add 1 small amplifier after a week. Vinegar in a dressing, a soluble fiber starter, or a daily cup of green tea and a handful of berries. Keep a simple log for 2 weeks and share it with your clinician if you take glucose-lowering medications. Gradually build. Let habit and taste lead the pace. Safety reminder and medical disclaimer. This information is educational and not individualized medical advice. If you have chronic conditions, take medications that affect blood sugar, have kidney disease, reflux, gastroparesis, or other medical concerns, consult your healthcare provider before making significant changes. If you're considering supplements like magnesium, bring your medication list and lab values to a clinician to ensure safety. References and more detailed study citations are linked in the video description for those who want to read the clinical literature. Closing encouragement. Modest changes. Meaningful freedom. You don't have to give up the foods that bring you joy to protect your blood sugar after 60. By shifting food structure, meal order, timing, light post-meal movement, and small nutritional additions, you can reduce the sharpness of post-meal spikes and restore confidence at the table. These strategies are practical, respectful of your life and preferences, and designed to be built slowly so they last. If this message resonated, please subscribe for more science-backed practical tips for aging well. Leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and which 1 or 2 strategies feel doable for you. I read these and they help shape future content. And most importantly, talk with your healthcare provider before making changes to medication or starting new supplements. Thank you for spending this time. Enjoy your next meal with curiosity rather than fear. And remember, small, consistent shifts can protect your blood sugar and keep the foods you love part of your life after 60.